Every superhero has a code. Spider-Man has a guilt complex. Here's what I mean. Most heroes are built on a triumph. A rocket off a dying world, a billionaire's vow, a super soldier serum. Spider-Man is built on a failure. A teenager gets powers, gets cocky, and lets a thief run right past him because stopping him wasn't his problem. And then that exact thief murders his uncle. The most famous line in comics, "With great power comes great responsibilities," isn't a motto he was handed. It's a lesson he learned standing over a body, knowing he could have stopped it and chose not to. So Spider-Man, from his very first page, is not powered by the people he saves. He's powered by the one he didn't, and that changes everything about his enemies. Because Spider-Man's villains aren't really threats to his life. Half the heroes on Earth could survive what he survives. They're threats to the promise, the deal he made over his uncle's grave, that if you're strong enough to help, you're guilty when you don't. Every great Spider-Man villain finds a different way to attack that. They make him fail. They make him doubt. They take his face, his name, his certainty. They prove the promise is a lie. So that's how I'm ranking them. Not by who hits hardest, by who cuts deepest, who actually breaks the part of Peter Parker that makes him Spider-Man. We're going from 10 up to 1, it's my list, and the gap between number 2 and number 1 has started more arguments than almost anything in comics. Let's get into it. We start with the one that looks like the biggest threat and is actually the smallest wound, the Sinister Six. First assembled back in 1964 by Dr. Octopus, who'd lost to Spider-Man one too many times and decided to do the math. If one villain can't beat him, 6 can. The classic lineup is Doc Ock leading the Vulture, Electro, Kraven, Mysterio, and the Sandman. And on paper, it's overwhelming. 6 of his worst enemies coordinated all at once. But here's why it's number 10. The Sinister Six is a fight, not a wound. It's pressure. Pure, physical, outnumbered, 6-1 pressure. And Spider-Man's whole thing is that he wins exactly those fights. Underdog, overwhelmed, no chance, finds a way. That's his comfort zone. He comes out the other side, exhausted and intact, and nothing about Peter Parker is different the next morning. It's the perfect demonstration of the rule this whole list runs on. 6 villains stacked together are less dangerous to who he is than one villain who knows where it hurts. The Sinister Six attacks Spider-Man. Everyone above them attacks Peter. That's the difference, and we're going to climb it one rung at a time. Number 9 is the villain you can't actually beat. You can only pause. Flint Marko, the Sandman, one of the oldest enemies in the gallery, and quietly one of the most tragic. He's not a maniac. He's a small-time crook who got turned into something physics doesn't know how to arrest. A man made of sand who can be a fist, a wave, a sandstorm, a statue. You can hit him as hard as you want. Your hand goes through him. You don't defeat Sandman, you just interrupt him. What makes him interesting is what he takes away. Spider-Man's whole method is that problems have a body. Something solid you can web up, knock out, hand to the police. Marko removes that. He's the enemy who teaches Peter that some things can't be solved, only outlasted. But here's the question I want you to keep in your head for the next few villains, because it's a whole ranking. Spider-Man wins every one of these fights. What matters is what each one leaves behind when it's over. And Sandman leaves him tired. That's all. There's no scar. Marko's even drifted toward being an ally over the years, a man who'd rather be left alone than be a monster. He's a tragedy, not a trauma. He's number 9. But keep that word, trauma, somewhere handy. Because from here on, we start meeting the villains who actually leave one. Number 8 is the one that turns the hero into prey. Morlun. He's a newer addition, created in 2001, and he's a completely different kind of threat. He's not a crook, Not a scientist, not someone with a grudge against Peter Parker. Morlun is a hunter of Spider-Man, a predator who travels between worlds devouring the life force of spider totems, of which Spider-Man is one. He doesn't want money or revenge, he wants to eat what Spider-Man fundamentally is, and that flips the entire dynamic. Spider-Man spends his life being the one who shows up, who intervenes, who has the situation handled. Morlun is the villain who makes him, for the first time, the thing being hunted. Not the spider in the web, the fly. He's relentless, nearly unkillable, and he pushed Peter to some of the most desperate, primal places he's ever gone. So why isn't he higher? Because for all that menace, Morlun is the most impersonal villain on this entire list. And that's the key. He doesn't care that there's a Peter Parker under the mask. To him, there's no man to know, only prey to consume. He'd track down any spider in any universe and feed on it exactly the same way. That's the whole premise of the bigger Spider-Verse story he anchors. And that's exactly why he can't break Spider-Man. You can't wound a man you've never bothered to meet. The villains above him know precisely who Peter Parker is. That's what beats raw lethality every time on this list. Number 7 is where the gallery stops being tragic and starts being a nightmare. Carnage. Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer who, in the early 90s, bonded with an offspring of the Venom symbiote while sharing a prison cell with Venom's host. The result is one of the most disturbing things in mainstream comics. All of Spider-Man's powers, none of his limits, fused to a man who was already a monster before the alien ever found him. People call Carnage pure chaos, but I think that undersells what makes him scary. Carnage isn't chaos for its own sake. He's what's left when a man decides that nothing he does means anything, that there are no consequences, no morality, no reason not to. The symbiote didn't make Cassidy evil. It just gave a nihilist the power to act on it. He's a dark answer to a question Spider-Man never wants to ask out loud. What is power with the conscience surgically removed? And what he leaves behind is different from Sandman. Sandman left him tired. Carnage leaves him compromised. Because Carnage is a body count waiting to happen, and stopping him forces Spider-Man to places he swore he'd never go. Fighting alongside Venom, his own dark mirror, because no one else is strong enough. Standing over a killer who will absolutely do it again, with the city screaming for blood, and feeling the line he drew for himself start to blur. That's a real Carnage wound. He doesn't hurt Peter. He makes Peter wonder, just for a second, whether the rules he lives by are a luxury the people he's protecting can't afford. But here's the ceiling. Carnage doesn't care about Peter Parker any more than Morlun does. He'd kill a bus full of strangers with the same grin. He's a horror Spider-Man contains. He's not a wound Spider-Man carries. 7. Carnage makes a whole city afraid. The next villain does something stranger and quieter. He makes Spider-Man afraid of his own eyes. Number 6 doesn't lay a finger on Spider-Man. He just makes him stop trusting his own eyes. Mysterio. Quentin Beck, a special effects genius and stuntman who decided the most powerful weapon against a hero isn't a punch, it's a lie. Fake monsters, fake deaths, fake worlds, hallucinations so convincing that Spider-Man can't tell what's real in the room with them. He's made Spider-Man watch friends turn into monsters mid-swing, grieve over people who were never dead, and freeze in front of a victim because he couldn't be sure they weren't just another illusion. He attacks the 3 things Peter actually runs on: his instincts, his spider sense, and his snap moral judgment about who needs saving. Think about how cruel that is for this hero specifically. Spider-Man's superpower, the real one, is that he reads a situation in a half second and does the right thing. Mysterio poisons that. He makes Peter hesitate, second guess, freeze, and for a man whose entire identity is "I act when I should," Hesitation is its own kind of torture. What Mysterio leaves behind is quieter than any of that. It's doubt, the worst kind, the kind aimed inward. Because here's the thing about an illusion, the moment it breaks, Spider-Man still has to live with what he did while he believed it was real. Who he didn't save because he was sure they were a trick, what he said to someone he thought was a ghost. Mysterio doesn't just make Peter doubt the room, he makes Peter doubt his own judgment, which for this hero is the deepest cut a con man could land. The limitation is that Beck is a man playing God, not a god. Once you find the projector, the spell ends. He shakes Peter badly. He doesn't remake him. 6. And here's where the whole list turns. Every villain to this point has been a stranger to Peter Parker. Sand, a predator, a serial killer, a con man. The next one is a friend, and that changes everything about what these fights cost. Number 5 is the first villain on this list Spider-Man can't fight without it hurting, because he's a friend. Dr. Curt Connors, the Lizard, a brilliant, kind, one-armed scientist who built a serum from reptile DNA to regrow his missing arm, and regrew himself into a monster instead. And here's what makes him the turning point of this whole countdown. Peter likes Curt Connors, respects him, sees a version of his own future in him, a good scientist whose own work turned on him. When Spider-Man fights a lizard, he isn't fighting a criminal. He's fighting a man he wishes he could save and can't. This is where Spider-Man's guilt engine fully switches on. Every lizard fight is the same sentence running underneath it. If I were faster, smarter, better, this wouldn't keep happening to my friend. And it does keep happening. That's the quiet cruelty of it. Peter talks Connors back from the edge, helps him find the cure, watches him hold his wife and son again like the nightmare's over. And then the formula slips its leash one more time and the whole thing starts again. It's a rescue that never finishes. It's a first real taste of the lesson that defines him. The saving someone once doesn't mean they stay saved. Now, the reason he's only number 5 is that Connors usually changes back. The man returns, the cycle resets. But don't mistake the reset for a clean slate. Every time Connors turns human again, it doesn't undo what Peter saw. The friend with blood on his claws, the thing wearing a good man's face, that stays. And that's why he outranks every force of nature below him. Carnage and Morlun and the Sandman are things that happen to Spider-Man. The Lizard is someone Spider-Man feels responsible for. That's a line we just crossed, and from here up, it only gets more personal. Because now, we hit the villains who don't just fight Spider-Man. They know him. Venom. It starts with the symbiote, a living alien costume Spider-Man picks up and wears before he realizes it's alive, and bonding to him and changing him. He rejects it, and the symbiote does what a rejected thing does. It finds someone who hates Spider-Man as much as it now does. That someone is Eddie Brock, and together they become Venom, debuting in his full form in 1988, and immediately becoming something no villain had been before. Because Venom knows everything. He knows Peter is Spider-Man. He knows the rhythms, the fears, the people Peter loves, the way he moves, the way he thinks, because the alien half of Venom used to be Spider-Man's own suit. There's no mask anymore, no secret to protect. Venom is Spider-Man with the restraint stripped out and the responsibility thrown away. The same powers, pointed by a man who feels none of the guilt. He's the corrupted mirror. This is what you'd be, Peter, if you decided the promise was a sucker's deal. The only reason he's not higher is the strangest compliment a villain can get. Venom got too popular. He grew into an anti-hero, a lead, a franchise of his own, a lethal protector with his own movies. But don't mistake that for going soft. The right way to say it is this: Venom didn't stop being Peter's problem. He just stopped being Peter's only problem. At his core, The first time that black mask peeled open into a fanged grin and called Peter by his name, he was the most personal villain Spider-Man had ever faced. 4. Venom knew all of Peter's secrets. The next villain didn't want his secrets. He wanted to prove the man keeping them was never anything special in the first place. And he wrote that proof in a grave. Number 3 spent most of his career as a punchline, a big game hunter in a line main vest who kept losing to a teenager, and then starred in what a lot of people will tell you is the single greatest Spider-Man story ever told, Kraven the Hunter, Sergei Kravinov. And I want to actually tell you this one, not just rank it, because the ranking doesn't mean anything without the story. By the late 80s, Kraven is old. He spent his whole life hunting the most dangerous game on Earth, and there's only one trophy that ever eluded him, the spider. And he's decided this is the year he stops losing, so he prepares the way a man prepares for the last thing he'll ever do. In the story, this is 1987, written by J.M. DeMatteis, drawn by Mike Zeck, and if you have never read it, pause this video, go find it, and come back. I mean that. It's one of the few superhero comics at hand to someone who insists the medium can't be literature. Kraven sits in a room full of spiders and eats them by the handful, immersing himself in his prey, becoming what he intends to kill. Then he finds Spider-Man, and he doesn't monologue, doesn't trap him in a death trap, doesn't give him a chance. He shoots him once, and he buries him in the ground. And then, here's the part that makes it a horror story instead of a murder. Kraven puts on the costume. He becomes Spider-Man. He goes out into the city night after night, fighting crime in the mask, brutally, doing the job better in his own mind than Peter ever did, proving to himself the only thing he ever wanted to prove, that the spider was nothing, that anyone with enough will could wear that mask, that Peter Parker was never special, the suit was. And for 2 full weeks, while Spider-Man lies drugged and buried in a box under the earth, Kraven gets to be right. When Peter finally claws his way up out of his own grave, and Zeck draws that panel like a resurrection, he comes back not to take revenge, but to find a broken man who's already won the only victory he cared about. Kraven has made his point. He doesn't fight to the death. He lets Spider-Man go, sits down, and takes his own life. Calm, satisfied, finished. That's identity annihilation, and it introduces the most quietly devastating idea in the whole gallery. That Spider-Man is replaceable, that the mask could be worn by someone else and the city might never know. Quick aside for anyone who watched my Batman video. DeMatteis first pitched this exact plot to DC as a story where the Joker defeats Batman and goes sane, got told no, and reworked it into Kraven. He later got to publish the Batman version too. Same dark DNA, 2 different heroes. I love that more than I can tell you. Kraven doesn't beat Spider-Man with strength. He beats him with a suggestion that the strength was never the thing that mattered. 3. And if being replaced for 2 weeks puts Kraven at 3, and number 2 is the man who did it permanently and did it from the inside, Dr. Octopus, Otto Octavius. One of the oldest and most important villains in the whole of superhero fiction, the founder of that Sinister Six we started with, the rival genius, the 4 mechanical arms, the superiority complex with a doctorate. For decades, the core of Doc Ock was simple. He believed he was smarter than Spider-Man, and it drove him insane that brains kept losing to a kid in pajamas. And then he won. Properly won, in a way almost no villain in comics ever has. Dying, Otto swapped his mind into Peter Parker's body and left Peter to die in his. He didn't kill Spider-Man. He became him, the superior Spider-Man, living Peter's life, kissing Peter's girlfriend, wearing Peter's face, and genuinely believing he was doing all of it better than Peter ever had. He took the name, the body, the friends, the responsibility, and he ran them like he'd earned them. That is the ultimate violation, and it's why a huge chunk of the fan base will fight me in the comments right now and insist Otto, not the Goblin, is the real number one. I get it. By accomplishment, they have a case. Doc Ock is the man who erased Peter Parker from his own life and called it an upgrade. But here's why I keep him at 2, and it comes down to one clean contrast. Dr. Octopus takes Peter's place. The Green Goblin takes Peter's world. One is an intellectual violation. The other is a wound that never closed. And that's the difference between 2 and 1. Number 1, the wound that never closes. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. First flying onto the page in 1964. The cackling businessman on the bat glider with the pumpkin bombs. For years, he was a great villain. He figured out Spider-Man's identity. He went after the people Peter loved. He was the personal enemy. But the reason he's number 1, above the genius who stole Peter's whole life, comes down to one night in one 1973 comic. A story so important they still teach it as the moment the entire medium grew up. Here's something I want you to actually try, because it's the only way to feel why this is number 1 instead of just hearing me say it. Picture the worst thing a villain ever did to a hero you love. Have it? Good. Now flip every instinct that just gave you. Don't make it bigger. Make it smaller, quieter. Make it look, for 1/2 second, like a save. That's the move that's coming. And I'll be honest, I've read this story more times than I can count, and it still gets me every time. The night Gwen Stacy died. The Goblin takes Gwen Stacy, the love of Peter's life, to the top of a bridge, and he throws her off. Spider-Man fires a web, catches her by the leg, feels a line go taut, and for 1/2 second thinks he's done it, thinks he's saved her, and then he pulls her up and she's dead. That's a moment. Not because a hero lost someone, heroes lose people. It's the moment because of how. For the first time, Spider-Man does everything right, reaches her in time, catches her, and it isn't enough. And the detail that makes it unbearable, the thing fans have argued about for 50 years. It's genuinely unclear whether the Goblin's throw killed her, or whether the whiplash of Spider-Man's own webline snapping taut is what broke her neck. Meaning the man who tried to save her may have helped kill her. The story refuses to tell you. That ambiguity isn't a plot hole, it's the point. It's the guilt, made permanent and unanswerable. Because here's what Norman Osborn actually did, and why no one else on this list comes close. Every other villain attacks Spider-Man's body, his identity, his certainty. The Goblin attacked the promise, the deal Peter made over his uncle's grave. That being strong enough to help means you can always save the people you love if you just try hard enough. The Goblin proved that's a lie. He proved that you can do everything right and still be too late. And from that moment on, Spider-Man stopped being a story about saving everyone. It became a story about not saving everyone. In time, and finding the strength to put the mask back on the next morning anyway. That's what the Goblin built by taking the one thing Peter couldn't get back. No villain ever wounded a hero deeper. Number 1, and it isn't close. So look at the ladder we just climbed. We started with the things that just happened to Spider-Man. A 6-on-1 beatdown, a man made of sand, a predator from another world, a symbiote-fueled massacre. Forces, they make him fight, they don't make him bleed. Then we climbed into the mind, the illusionist who poisons his certainty, the friend he can't save. Then into the truly personal, the mirror who knows his every secret, the hunter who buried him to prove he was nothing. Then the man who stole his entire life from the inside. And at the very top, the one who took the person he loved most, and with her, the belief that trying hard enough is ever enough. That's the shape of Spider-Man's enemies. The higher you go, the less it's about the punch and the more it's about the promise, guilt, identity, responsibility, until you reach the wound the whole character is built around. Other heroes get villains, Spider-Man gets consequences. Now, your turn, and I built this whole thing to start a fight at the top. I put the Green Goblin over Dr. Octopus, and I know plenty of you think the man who literally became Spider-Man should be number one. So make the case. Genuinely, I read every one of these. And before the comments fill up, yes, I left people out. The Chameleon, the very first villain Peter ever fought, and Kraven's own brother. The Vulture, older than almost all of them. The Hobgoblin, Electro, the Scorpion, and the big one I can already hear you typing, the Jackal, the only villain who ever made Peter doubt whether he was the real Peter Parker. That's a whole video on its own, and the Clone Saga is a swamp I'm not wading into today. So tell me, is it Goblin or Ock at number one for you? Who did I rank too low? And which villain broke your Spider-Man? The one that actually got under your skin? The best answers down there are half the reason I make these. If you enjoyed this, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, stick around, the next one's already in the works. I'll see you in the next one.